Hello, everybody. I can see some folks just joining. We're going to give people about another minute to get acclimated to the Zoom room, but thank you all for joining us. I can still see some names that are joining, but I do want to jump in. My name is Max. I'm with your Northwestern Alumni Association. We'll begin shortly. We're so happy that Barry could join us for this webinar. But first, I want to do a quick review of a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions now or during the presentation that you'd like to ask Barry, please feel free to use the Ask Your Question or the chat box of your webinar dashboard. We want to make this as interactive as possible, so please feel free to share your thoughts. You will also find some great resources in those bottom tabs of the webinar platform. Please feel free to view that information at your leisure. And if you do have any technical issues during the call, simply close out of the call and restart the Zoom application. Or if you're using your browser, refresh the link using the same one that you received upon registering. Typically, most issues are Wi-Fi related and can be addressed simply by refreshing the page. And finally, we do want to remind people of two different things. First of all, you'll receive a link to the recording of this webinar and a post-event survey to all registrants after the talk. And we just relaunched our YouTube channel. So very happily, this will be up on the NAA YouTube channel, which just relaunched this September. So after you get that email, you'll be able to watch this at your leisure. Now I'm very pleased to introduce our presenter, Barry Joseph. He's a games-based educator, game designer, and founder of the Games for Change Festival. After learning that Sondheim once considered leaving the world of musical theater for video game design, Barry began researching his fascination with games and puzzles, seeking to understand the mind that transformed musical theater. Barry worked at the American Museum of Natural History and Girl Scouts of USA, and he's now the founder of Barry Joseph Consulting, dedicated to innovating solutions for learning in a digital age, and the Brooklyn Seltzer Museum. He teaches digital design for museum-based learning at New York University, based off his book Making Dinosaurs Dance, a toolkit for digital design in museums. And his latest book, Matching Minds with Sondheim, The Puzzles and Games of the Broadway Legend, came out in 2025. Barry, congrats on the book. Thanks for joining us. Take it away.
Thank you, Max. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Barry Joseph, and welcome to Matching Minds with Sondheim. Let's first get the obvious question out of the way. Yes, that's Stephen Sondheim, lyricist, composer, to many, one of the most important creative voices of the last century, and to others, just God. And yes, a game designer and puzzle constructor and jigsaw puzzle gifter and escape room evangelist and so much more. The Sondheim most of us know from his work in musical theater produced work that I argue is as equally compelling and beguiling in the space of puzzles and games from over his entire life. But first, I'd like to thank Max again for bringing me here today and everyone involved at his end for running today's event. I'd also like to thank you all for attending. And finally, I'd like to thank the Northwestern editors of the class of 1991 yearbook for not making me take a new photo. My apologies for the people who are next to me. I'd also like to thank the over 100 people who spoke with me for the book. I'll share a few of their voices with you now, along with some images from the book and the original theme song to my podcast, composed by Cole Malloy and sung by Ann Morrison.
We were there.
Oh, it's so much fun.
There's no better way to represent his brilliance than through puzzles.
I feel like he was probably more obsessed with puzzles than musicals. Maybe that's heresy.
He was a brilliant puzzle solver, had a great mind.
It was quite amazing when you walked into his apartment because it was full of games and puzzles.
When Sondheim started to build the cryptic crosswords for New York Magazine,
his treasure hunts were legendary.
Everybody was just running around screaming and laughing and
it's almost ridiculous to be like, yeah, I went on a scavenger hunt created by Stephen Sondheim.
You know, in some ways you could almost consider him like the sort of inventor of the very form of escape rooms or puzzles, because
Stephen Sondheim blurted out when the final exit door opened, "But I want to stay."
How cool that we're sitting here trying to figure this game out again.
I have to say, I'm so grateful to be invited to participate in this. I can't tell you. It's just such a gift, you know, and he's here, you know, he's here.
Matching minds with Sondheim, tell a friend and quiz him. Test him on his anagram, his pure hedonism. His songs and his shows, Mary Flynn, Mama Rouse, everybody already knows they're superbly designed. But where would we be without a puzzle to bring us glee? Even someone in a tree would believe we need Steve and his mind.
Moments of clarity, moments of connection. This is what I love so much in the musical works of Stephen Sondheim. Moments of clarity, like the end of Act 2 of Sunday in the Park with George. Moments of connection, like Bobby and company learning how to finally be alive. Moments of clarity and moments of connection are also the two themes I heard the most within the voices you just heard. Just a handful among the more than 100 people I spoke with for over 60 hours as part of the research for my book, Matching Minds with Sondheim. Sondheim's friends, colleagues, loved ones. But in this case, I wasn't asking them about musical theater. We were talking about Sondheim's games. I think we need a little bit of a warm-up. Shall we try one of Sondheim's puzzles? I'm going to look for you guys in the chat to see if you're ready. You don't want to play a game yet? There we go. All right. The one I'm going to show you is a creation from a 1995 treasure hunt in New York City that Sondheim designed for a fundraiser for the Edna St. Vincent Millay Society. It's all right, Max. We believe in you. All right. What's the number when you dial it on the telephone? If you think you know the answer, go ahead and type it in. If you don't know an answer, but you think there might be a way to solve it, go ahead and solve that potential solution as well. And Dara, you can't answer because I know you know. Anybody want to make a guess? If so, you can't put your hand up in the webinar, I think. Just type something in the chat. Is it the number that corresponds with the I and the T? Max, that is right. And I don't want to be presumptuous about your age, but I don't know if you have the old style phones that in 1995 everybody would have had at the time, which would have showed you that the answer was 48. Because there on the dial pad, the I, when you dial it on the telephone, is a 4, and the T is an 8. So let's take a moment to just step back and think about the design of this puzzle and what it tells us about the values that Sondheim embedded into a puzzle like this. This is an open question for anyone. And Dara, you can participate if you want. I'll be watching the chat. I know I'm putting a lot of pressure on you, but I want to make this as interactive as possible, as if I could see your faces and as if I could hear your voices. Because as I said, moments of connection is one of the key themes about this book. Well, to me, there's a few things that come to mind. One is it's a very democratic puzzle. Back in 1995, anybody could do this. It was based on common knowledge. Everyone knew what these paths looked like on their telephones. Number two, it's fair. Whether or not you solved it or not, I think when you see the answer, you say, okay, that makes sense. That was something that was designed for me to be able to do. And finally, there's a misdirection here. If you look at the image here, that's an old style telephone that does not have a keypad. Stephen Sondheim put an image in our mind that excluded the keypad, which was required to solve it. So even though the puzzle was fair in its solution, the way he asked it was tricky, but in a playful way. All right, I think we're getting ready. Before we move a little bit further, I want to get a better sense of who all of you are. So if you can, in the chat, if one of the reasons you're here is because you love puzzles, please type the word puzzles into the chat. And while the puzzle people are getting ready, I'm going to next ask about games and then Sondheim. Now, puzzles. I see one puzzles, two puzzles. And if you're getting ready to type puzzles, go ahead. But if you're also here because of the games, because you love games, go ahead and type games in. So give me a sense of who you are. If we were in person, I'd ask you to put up your hands. Sherry's here for puzzles and games. Mike, Jamie, Anastasia, games. Finally, who is here also because of Sondheim? You can just type in the word Sondheim or SS for Stephen Sondheim. Sherry says Sondheim. Any other Sondheim fans here? Max. Max specifically loves musical theater. All right. And if anyone here didn't put up your hand, are you sure you came to the right webinar? No, seriously. Thank you for coming. Every one of you, but especially you. I, of course, put up my hands for all three: games, puzzles, and Stephen Sondheim. I grew up listening to my parents' West Side Story album. When I started seeing Broadway shows on my own as an adult, Passion is one of the first that I saw, and started following Sondheim shows and revivals ever since. I'm a founder of the Games for Change Festival, one of the co-founders. I've produced and designed many card games and board games, many with social impact or for educational goals. And I also teach at NYU. This project started because of my passion for Stephen Sondheim. In March of 2022, I received 3 books from my wife. One is the book on the left, which is looking at the works of Stephen Sondheim from a postmodern perspective, so analyzing each show from that trajectory. The middle is the 1990s biography by Meryl Seacrest, in which she interviewed Stephen Sondheim and those who knew him for many scores of hours. And then on the right is the more recent James Lapine's book, Putting It Together, which is an oral history of the show I mentioned earlier, Sunday in the Park with George. Now, if you don't know much about Sondheim, the key thing you need to know right now is that Sunday in the Park with George was a transformational moment for him in the history of his career. He had just been involved in a string of tremendous successes on Broadway and then a phenomenal flop that the critics loved hating. Merrily We Roll Along. And so going into Sunday in the Park with George, when James Lapine met him, Sondheim wasn't sure if he wanted to stay in musical theater. He thought he'd leave. And this is the quote that I read in Putting It Together. I thought, I don't want to be in this profession. It's just too hostile and mean-spirited. What else can I do? I thought I'd love to invent games, video games. That was what I really wanted to do. When I read that, my head spun around. I loved Stephen Sondheim and I loved games, but I never knew that he had any consciousness in his mind that he could live in both spaces. I'd never heard about his interest in games. I didn't know about his involvement with puzzles. All I knew is that out of nowhere, in the early 80s, he was telling James Lapine that he wanted to go into the world of video game design. Of course, he didn't. He stayed with James Lapine. They created Sunday in the Park with George, and he's kept making many phenomenal musicals in the decades after that. But I thought, where did that even come from? So I began to dig into the research, which led me to 7 different institutions like the Library of Congress and to Yale. I've reviewed scores of articles, analyzed hundreds of hours of audios from previous interviews, and conducted my own original interviews. And what I've learned could barely fit into a book, let alone a 60-minute presentation. But I've always loved a challenge or a good puzzle. So what did Sondheim do with games and puzzles? Let's listen to what he had to say.
In a sense, your fascination with puzzles, you can't help but wonder about whether that's in any way analogous to putting together a show.
Oh, it is very much, sure. Well, I think that's what art is anyway. I mean, after all, puzzle is, like art, is making order out of chaos. You know, take a jigsaw puzzle, right? It's chaos, put together, it's a picture. And I think art is the same way on a slightly higher level.
Order out of chaos. This is a phrase Sondheim would repeat over the years. Puzzles were a way to spin chaos into order. When Stephen Sondheim designed puzzles, he was creating experiences for others to have that aha moment when confusion melts into clarity. Think about any moments of clarity you might have felt today, whether we were looking at the puzzle with the telephone or any other puzzles you might have worked on today or in the past week. That's a precious feeling, and it's a gift to get to give them to others. Games, however, are different. They're not about moments of clarity. They're about moments of connection. When you design a game to create opportunities for players to connect with one another and with yourself, think about any moments of connections you had playing a game. In fact, go ahead in the chat. Think about a game you played in the last week, the last month, even the last year with someone else. Go ahead and type the name of the game here. Being shy. Okay, then just think to yourself about that game you played, and more importantly, think about who you played it with. And think about how the playing of the game was both fun to play, but also just a way for you to build that connection. Was it a tense competition of a game? Was it something collaborative? and you were supporting each other, think about the ways that the game supported you to build that connection and have the kind of relationship you're looking for. Mike is mentioning a game that he created. Here we go. Jamie said an online RPG as a kid. Ed said Ticket to Ride, which he loves. All right, so again, in summary, Sondheim used puzzles to create moments of clarity and games to create moments of connection. And so your job now, as we go through examples of what Sondheim did, is to look for this in action. And we'll take a quick review of the 5 main areas of Sondheim's ludological, that means playful interests: parlor games, board games, treasure hunts, cryptic crosswords, and physical puzzles. And then if we have time, and think we will, we'll take one on ourselves. All right, so the first type I said were parlor games, which are often called party games these days. Ideally, we would play this in person, but I tried it with the audio and just couldn't get it to work. But I'll show here why I'm showing this one. There was an interview that Tony Kushner did with Stephen Sondheim talking about why he called someone a genius, and it had to do with the development of this game.
I want to ask you about something you just said, when you said that Jerry Robbins was the only genius.
For me, what it means is a man of endless invention. He never stopped. I used to have game parties. He would come down, he would invent games in front of you, and games that nobody ever invented before. And I don't mean acting games, I mean game games, I mean competitive games. One night we had a game party, we played charades, something like that. He said, I got an idea. And he sat us all in rows of chairs, but about 8 people. And behind us, he made noises that you hear every day in your life. So he gives each pad paper and pencil, said, okay, what are these? And it was things like an umbrella opening, unwrapping a toothbrush, a lighter clicking open. It was a wonderful game because he was listening to what you had never listened to before. That's the kind of thing he did all the time. He always invented, and that's of course what he did on the stage. He never stopped inventing. And that's, to me, what I mean by the word genius, which is a constant flow of ideas.
A constant flow of ideas. And in this case, that idea flowed into this game that Sondheim liked to play. It was called the listening game. So the way it works is, if I'm running the game, I'm going to have a group of people sitting in front of me. It could be everyone at the party or just a handful, and everyone else is watching. And they're sitting in a row as if they're watching a stage, but I'm behind them. They can't see me. And I made sure everyone has a writing implement. Could be their phone, could be a piece of paper and a pen or pencil. And what I tell them is that I'm going to make sounds behind them. And they're sounds that are everyday objects. And I say that so they know it's not a trick, and that it's something they should all know. It's not something esoteric. They have to guess. And what I'm going to do is make the sounds behind their heads, and all they have to do is write it down on the piece of paper. What do they think that sound is? And their examples here you see is opening an umbrella, unwrapping a toothbrush, lighting a lighter. And as people are writing down what they think it is, they're collecting on a sheet of paper all their guesses. And once we're done, we then reveal the umbrella. We reveal the toothbrush. We reveal the lighter, and we hear what people wrote down. If they got it right, they get a point. And if not, we're all just going to laugh and have a good time. So this is a game that Sondheim talked about because he loved how Jerry Robbins just came up with it and how it teaches you how to listen. But I also wonder, given what we're talking about, if anyone else is hearing anything in how this game was designed and why it might have been of interest to Stephen Sondheim. If so, please write into the chat. And I'm going to hit you guys with 2 questions at once. Second question is, if you were going to bring this into your own house to run your own party, what objects might you use? Here we have umbrella, a toothbrush, a lighter. What might you want to have in your party? What reflects you, your household, your theme for your party that you think will be fun for folks, for your friends, for your family? So I spoke about moments of clarity, that moment when someone writes something down and they see that they're right. Oh, it is an umbrella. Or they wrote something down and got it wrong. They go, oh, that's what it is. That's that moment of clarity coming together. And the laughter that everyone has, whether they got it right or wrong in that experience, that if it's done right and it's not making fun of people, will make everyone feel connected. Mike is saying using a clicking pen, click, click, click. A rolling pin. I wonder what the sound of a rolling pin is. And a kazoo. I like that. I would hope that would be an easy one. Max says a colander. Maybe you can scratch it with your hand. A soccer ball and a pen. And Jamie, a squeaky toy. All right. Thank you. So this is an example of one of the many parlor games he liked to play, and we'll look at the end at one he designed. Let's move on now to board games. Sondheim in the early 1960s received a board game framed from a friend that began a lifelong love of the design of old European boards, which he would use to decorate his walls. When after he died in June of 2024, his games were sold at auction. Look at some of these prices. Estimated 800 sold for 4,000. Estimated 400 sold for 4,000. We have the humorous and accidental filled voyage into the cottage of content, estimated at 600, sold for 7,000. Estimated at 200, sold for $7,000. Now, what I want to do is go back to the first one that we just saw. That's the French, and I don't speak French. I took Japanese at Northwestern. Le jeu des petites miseries, but in English, I know what it means. The game of little miseries. This game from the 1890s is a variant of what's called the game of the goose, where you just roll a die and move around a board based on whatever number comes on the die. This was popular from the 16th century, many years before this game, but from which it was clearly derived. While players of the game of the goose roll dice to race around a track, hoping to avoid obstacles along the way, in Petite Miseries, players travel from birth, which is square one, to marriage, the last square, square 42, encountering challenges to avoid, like square 20, the ungallant lobster, and this one, square 23's un reçu, I can't even pronounce the word for this one. It's, in English, a bloodthirsty razor. That is a bloodthirsty razor in the hands of a clumsy barber. One might imagine the game hanging on Sondheim's wall as he wrote musicals in which characters sing songs about dysfunctional marriages, slice the throats of their barber clientele, and in general face, sometimes for the better, most often for the worst, les petites miseries. Reporters to Sondheim's home always wrote about games like this. Stephen Schiff penned an extensive profile on Sondheim in the March 1993 issue of The New Yorker. When I interviewed Schiff for my book, he described the games as, quote, redolent of another time, end quote. Schiff saw the boards as offering one an opportunity to reflect on what we have in common with those times. And when it comes to Schiff's views of Sondheim's best musicals, Sweeney Todd, A Little Night Music, the first act of Sunday in the Park with George, they're all period pieces. Schiff appreciates Sondheim's ability to place himself into the minds of others, into their place and time, and find all the contemporary human richness evoked by their context. He told me, quote, Sondheim spent a lot of his creative time in that kind of past, end quote. What Schiff is saying here is that the games that decorated Sondheim's walls were often not just physical manifestations of a set of rules, but an artistic encapsulation of their time. Then, of course, there are the many board games Stephen Sondheim designed, but that's a rich subject for another presentation. Sondheim also loved treasure hunts, which he enjoyed as a child searching for clues in Central Park. His most famous one was a Halloween treasure hunt in 1968, designed with, do you guys know who that is? Anthony Perkins. He would make these elaborate hunts around the city, around theaters, for friends and fundraisers, and often just for fun. This shows you the treasure hunts I was able to document for my book from 1968 through 2013. I presume there are more, but these are ones in which I was able to speak with people who were there, who worked with him on them, and often had material that was still available from them as well. The telephone one that we did, that's from the 1995 one. You can see it there right in the middle. And we did that puzzle. Would you guys like to try another puzzle? I'm watching in the chat. Max, I know you're going to say yes. I see some other stuff coming up. Excellent. All right. So get out your pens and paper or your computer or whatever works for you guys. Now, I'm going to put you back in time. Imagine it is 2011. You're an adult and you're invited to a fancy party in New York City, held here at the historic New York City Center. At the cocktail party, Stephen Sondheim steps up to a microphone and announces, surprising you, that it's time for a treasure hunt. That's going to be in 12 parts. Each puzzle will lead you to a different location in the theater. You get together with your team, and your team is handed a number of sheets, and you get this one to work on. And the rules are, this is a number of shows, 6 shows. You have to arrange the titles in chronological order, then read either all of the first letters or all of the last letters, either up or down, to find this puzzle's ticket. Again, remember, it's going to tell you somewhere to go in the theater, okay? You had an hour to do this and the 12 others, but for you guys today, I'm just going to give you 1 minute. If you think you know the answer, just type, I have it. Don't say what the answer is. Just say you have it in the chat. Good luck, Max. And if you're not a musical theater person, it's okay to look up the years online. All right. No one said they have it in the chat. I'm going to wait one extra moment and see if someone thinks they might know. Oh, I have a, okay. Jamie says they have a word. Jamie, let's see what the word is. S-C-O-N-E. Well, let's find out. This is the shows in chronological order from the oldest, Kiss Me Kate, to Cats. If you flip the order to make it easier to read, and then you read the last letters from top to bottom, you got it, Jamie. S-C-O-N-C-E, a sconce. A sconce is the light fixture. Jamie, you would have won. Congratulations. Everyone give a round of applause to Jamie. So Jamie, I don't know. I know you can't talk right now, but if you can type, what did it feel like when you figured out the solution? You said you weren't sure, but you thought you might be right. What was that like? And see if you can respond just a few words. That would be great, just because of timing, since we can't see you typing. You didn't think it was right. So how'd you feel right now when you found out you were right? Accomplished. Nice. Well, Stephen Sondheim made you feel that through his puzzle design, to feel that moment of order being achieved out of chaos. So again, congratulations. Moving on from treasure hunts, we're going to talk about word puzzles. Now, anybody with a passing familiarity with lyrics of Stephen Sondheim knows that he had a remarkable ability with words. But word puzzles showed a different side.
You just don't see words as collections of letters. I passed under this, when Cinerama first was invented, I passed under the sign that was being erected on Broadway. It said Cinerama, and I immediately thought American. Didn't have to think about it.
Wait a minute, Cinerama
and American are anagrams of each other.
Actually, it was Oscar Hammerstein who got me interested in words and crossword puzzles and anagrams.
So two things here. First, Sondheim is telling us that there's another way of looking at the world. When I look at words, I see meaning. And he says when he looks at words, he sees a collection of letters. He's not confused by the meaning. And he's able to create new meaning by manipulating those words. He also says Oscar Hammerstein introduced him. How did he get connected with Oscar Hammerstein? Well, Sondheim originally grew up, as you can see in the upper right, in New York City. But his parents divorced when he was 10 years old. His mom then moved him out to Pennsylvania, to Bucks County. And there, Stephen Sondheim met Oscar Hammerstein. Oscar became his mentor, but also somewhat of a substitute father. And Hammerstein taught him highly competitive word games, such as the cryptic crosswords that could be found in British papers. As an adult, Sondheim continued to play with these puzzles. And in fact, Thursday was the day when he was working with Leonard Bernstein on West Side Story, when the paper would arrive from England. So everyone knew Thursday morning, no work was getting done. Lenny and Stephen were going to be sitting together doing the cryptic crossword puzzles from England. And Stephen Sondheim kept every single one that he did for decades. He not only completed them, as you can see an example here, that was gifted to Will Shortz, but he kept onto them. And he used them to train himself when he became the first puzzle editor for a new publication in 1968. Some of you might recognize it. It's called New York Magazine. For over a year, he was their puzzle editor. And he popularized cryptic crosswords in America through his role. They had existed in America, but they hadn't been Americanized, and they weren't made accessible in the way Stephen Sondheim did. Now, if you'd like to do cryptics, say yes in the chat so I have a sense of who knows them here. But for everyone else, we're going to walk through what is a cryptic crossword and how does it work. So here's an example. A typical clue in a crossword is fairly straightforward. What was who won the Grammy in 1987, let's say, right? But cryptics offer clues that are also puzzling in and of themselves. First thing you need to notice is that they look like regular sentences, but a little bit off, like wed a silly admirer. That kind of makes sense. That could be a sentence. But as we learned from Sondheim, the meaning is there to distract us. It's not actually going to help you figure out the answer. It tells you at the end, in this case, that 7 is the answer you're looking for, 7 letters. Most cryptic crosswords are actually 2 in 1. You put a line, as you can see that yellow line at one spot, and on one side, you don't know which side it's going to be, is going to be a direct, straightforward clue, like who won the Grammy in this year. The other side is going to be one of a range of a dozen or more types, like an anagram, for example. So in this case, the answer on one side is wed. So it's a word that means something like wed. And on the right, it says a silly admirer. And in this case, silly is telling us that it's an anagram of what? Admirer, which is 7 letters. Admirer can be remixed into married, which also means wed. Right? So that's how these work. And that means you would then write into the grid at whatever number this is, top or down, the word married. So again, you start a cryptic crossword by looking at it and trying to ignore what it looks like it means. Try and figure out where to split it into 2 parts, then figure out which side is straightforward and which one is not. Stephen Sondheim wrote about this as an example. Simple, yes. Tricky, yes. Fair, yes. And those are the values he tried to keep into all of his cryptic crosswords. Simple, tricky, and fair. Although, simple, I don't know about that. So let's look at this one. Push through the district attorney. Otherwise, he lies back. Push through the district attorney. Otherwise, he lies back. So take a moment and try and think, where might you put the line to split it into 2? And which side would be the straightforward clue versus the more cryptic one? And I'll reveal it in 10 seconds. All right, the line goes after the word push through. So push through is the straightforward definition, a word that means push through, and then the tricky cryptic part is the rest. The district attorney, otherwise he lies back. What does that possibly mean? Well, it, again, doesn't mean exactly what it looks like. What can we do? Let's see. A district attorney is shortened down to what? A DA, right? The letters D and A. Otherwise is also the word or, OR, and someone who lies is what? They're a liar. So if you put that together, DAOR, LIAR, and then it says the word back. If you read that all backwards, what do you get? You get railroad. To push something through is to railroad it, and railroad backwards is DA or LIAR. This would be one of like 45 clues in that week's cryptic. My favorite one, and the one that's often talked about the most, is this one. Broken harmonicas found floating in Manhattan. Broken harmonicas found floating in Manhattan. Take a moment again and just see, can you think about where might you split it into 2 parts? The line goes here. Broken harmonicas on one side, found floating in Manhattan the other. Take a moment and think which one is the straightforward definition and which one's the cryptic. Now, if you did cryptics, you would know the word broken is suggesting that the word harmonicas is going to be an anagram of the answer. So you now know that the right side is going to be the straightforward one, and the left is going to be an anagram of the word harmonicas. Again, it's 10 letters, harmonicas, 10 letters. Okay, so what is an anagram of harmonicas that can be found floating in Manhattan? When I try to solve this, I picture Manhattan, a city that I live in, and I picture the Hudson River, and I picture things floating in the Hudson River. Now, this does not say things floating in the Hudson River. It says floating in Manhattan, which is odd, but I chose to ignore it because I was distracted by the meaning. But if I rethink it and say, okay, what else could be a Manhattan? Well, a Manhattan can be a drink. What's found floating in the drink, the Manhattan? A cherry. And what type of cherry? A maraschino cherry, which is an anagram for harmonicas. And this, for me, packs in so much of the kind of values that he includes in his puzzles. It's fair. It makes sense when it's done. I see how it could be solved, but I also see how he was misdirecting me by making me picture in my mind broken harmonicas floating in the Hudson River, which he never said, but suggested, and I took the bait. Right? Sondheim created in total 42 cryptic crossword puzzles for New York Magazine, starting with the magazine's first issue in 1968, and until he stepped away in 1969 to work on a show many of us know and love called Company. But his work has echoed over the decades as cryptic crosswords are now something you can find all over the country and even changed the way the New York Times crossword puzzles are done. Sondheim. I'm going to skip that. All right. We've just briefly explored Sondheim's relationship with parlor games, board games, treasure hunts, and word puzzles. Last but not least, let's take a short look at mechanical puzzles, of which I describe 3 types in my book. And first, an important Broadway tradition is the opening night gift, such as these 6 inscribed Tiffany beans from Stephen Sondheim to the cast of Into the Woods, which were a puzzle. And starting in 1993, and until he passed, his opening night gift became a personalized, deviously designed wooden jigsaw puzzle. Its image, the poster from the show, and the initials of the recipient incorporated into each puzzle. You see that E and the B on the left? That was E. Ty Benson from Company. I'm going to play in the background a video of me putting one together. Only like maybe 60 seconds or 45 seconds, but sped up from 46 minutes because that's how long it took. Now on the right, we see Sondheim on a piano. You see that? What can you see on the piano? Those are called puzzle boxes. And one is actually by Kagan Sound. That's the one in the close-up on the bottom. He's America's great puzzle box designer. A puzzle box is a beautifully designed object which challenges you to open it with no obvious moving parts. In the last decades of his life, Sondheim was an avid collector. And then finally, if you took a puzzle box and you expanded it to the size of a room, then challenged people to get out of it, what would you have? An escape room, which you have right in the middle. When the first escape room landed in New York in late 2018, Stephen Sondheim was 83 years old. Decades earlier, he was the one designing the puzzles. He was the one setting the scenes. He was playing game master, all just to spend time in a playful way with friends and colleagues. Now, in 2013, his city was filling up empty office spaces and random apartments with open invitations to a seemingly never-ending list of personalized parties. I imagine it must have been a dream come true. Yeah, Jamie's noticing who's in that room. Impressive group of people, right? All right. Yep, we have time. I think we're ready now for an expedition. I've laid out the map that details the territory, and what rich territory, from parlor games to jigsaw puzzles. Now, if you're up for it, I'd like to take you on a deep dive and see what we can unearth about the mind of Stephen Sondheim. Let's follow the trail of the murder game. In 1965, Sondheim had a friend, Phyllis Newman, whose new show had flopped out of town. "Don't be depressed," he told her backstage. "What can I do for you?" "You can throw me a party when I get back to New York," she asked. Is found in the research library at Boston U, a 6-page letter from Sondheim to Herbert Ross, instructing Ross on how to run it himself. Ross, who had just a few years earlier asked Sondheim to adapt the game into what became the film The Last of Sheila. Well, we obviously can't play it now, right? We're all, obviously distributed all over the country. Or can we? In 1982, Sondheim was invited to be featured in a profile for Games magazine. A reader since the start, in 1977, he said he read every issue. Along with the interview, he offered to submit a puzzle, and he adapted the murder game. Would you guys like to play it? I'm watching in the chat. No one wants to play? You just want to hear me talk about it? Mike's like, okay, I'll play. OMITB style. I have no clue what that means, Max. You're going to have to educate me on that one. But I think we have enough to play. All right, here's how this is going to work. Only Murders in the Building style. Actually, the game that they play in Only Murders in the Building is a version of, has the same sources as the murder game. Because just like in Only Murders in the Building, it starts with a deck of cards. So Stephen Sondheim takes out a deck of cards and shuffles them together. He's removed everything but the hearts. And he only has the first, what do you have here, 10 cards? Yeah, 10 cards. And you are all collectively going to be the person who gets the 7 of hearts. When you get your card, Sondheim says there's envelopes here, and they have a number on the outside. Find your envelope. So we all go and we get envelope number 7. And when we open it up, there's instructions. It says, your mission, go to the kitchen, find a photo, and get back here. Where you are right now is the safe room. You're safe in the safe room. But once you leave it, someone else is secretly the murderer, and they can kill you. If they go up to you with their fingers in a gun position and say, bang, bang, you're dead, you must fall down dead. They might leave you there. They might take your photo. Whatever happens, stay there until we collect you. Okay, so we open up our envelope. It says, go to the kitchen. We go to the kitchen, and we find this photo. It's a photo of some Scrabble pieces. We look around. No one's there. We get back to the room. We did it. We're safe. We survived, right? Thanks, Jamie. And now you wait to see who else is going to make it back alive or who's dead. Did Tony Perkins make it back? Jerome Robbins? Lee Remick? So some people made it back alive. It turns out Lee Remick, Peter Schaefer, and Phyllis Newman all were killed. Everyone else is told, take your photo, put it on top of your envelope, and put it on the table. Now, everybody can play. Look at what's on the table, and whether you survived being the potential murder attack, you are the murderer, or you were killed, you now are tasked with 2 things: identifying who the murderer is, and not just accusing someone, proving it. Obviously, Lee, Peter, and Phyllis know who killed them, but they're going to have to, if they accuse the person who killed them, be able to say how they can prove it. So now everybody can play. So let's go ahead. We're going to take a minute and see if anyone looking at this can figure anything out. And of course, he would tell people, don't just keep things in your head, talk to each other. So feel free to ask questions in the chat. If you have any questions of me, I'll now be Stephen Sondheim, pretending I'm running the party. You can ask me questions. Otherwise, if we were playing in person, the murderer has 10 minutes. If no one guesses the murderer in 10 minutes, the murderer gets away with it. But for us, it's just going to be a minute. I'm going to set my timer. Set timer for 1 minute. "30 seconds before the murderer gets away." Feel free to put out guesses or ask questions, or even just tell us how you're trying to solve it. What are you looking for? What are you noticing? All right, any guesses? Even if you're not sure, if you want to accuse someone, go ahead. Meanwhile, you know that it can't have anything to do with the person itself because their cards were randomly selected, right? We're not assuming that some magic trick was used. So if that was the case, if it was truly random, what we do know is not random is that the photos are associated with the cards, numbers, right? So is there anything you might notice about numbers in the photos and the number of the envelope that directed those people to get those items? For example, Tony Schaefer, who was number 5, picked up a photo of a 5-pointed star. Marianne Madden, who had envelope number 9, got a picture of 9 chess pieces. What did we get? We got some Scrabble pieces, right? That's right, Mike, it has 7 tiles. We might see a pattern here. So what is that pattern? Mike, how would you describe that pattern? Nine has 9 pieces. All right, so we're seeing that people's photos match their number, but is there an exception? Sondheim often created puzzles by forcing you to figure out the pattern and then find the exception. Mike has noticed number 8, Jerome Robbins, does not have 8 things in it. It has 4. What might that suggest to us? We were told the murderer might take a photo from someone they killed because the murderer's not going to get their own photo. That means that Jerome Robbins killed Peter Schaefer and took his picture of 4. So that's how you can not only accuse the correct murderer, Jerome Robbins, but prove it. And this style, as I mentioned, hide a pattern and then break the pattern, is something he used often, not often, occasionally in his puzzles as a form of misdirection and also a way to get you to an answer that you know has to be right because everything else follows the pattern. If anyone here has watched his murder mystery movie, The Last of Sheila, you will recognize that that is actually how that movie is solved as well. The puzzle is solved by figuring out a pattern that's established in the movie and then finding out the exception to it, that the murderer inadvertently trips into and the other people can use to solve. And yes, as I mentioned, this game was the basis of the movie The Last of Sheila. In fact, the first half of the movie is all about puzzles and games that he used to do on his own and also with Anthony Perkins. I mentioned 1965. We had the murder game in his house as a parlor game. In 83, it was a puzzle that you can do in print in Games magazine. But this game just kept on going. It was also the inspiration of the song Finishing the Hat from the 1984 Sunday in the Park with George. And as if that wasn't enough, it is also connected to his last appearance, Stephen Sondheim's, in a movie. It was a cameo in the 2002 film Glass Onion. I could spend an entire hour just talking about the game, and I've just given you a little bit of piece of it, and it gave us a chance to kind of work together to try to match minds with Sondheim. All right, so we looked at how Sondheim used games and puzzles to create moments of clarity and moments of connection. But what we didn't do is address why and what it might tell us about his personality. Puzzles pose a challenge. I dare you to solve my riddle. Games offer an invitation. Come, play with me. We can combine the two to get, I dare you to come play with me. I push you away, then draw you close. Sondheim used play to invite others to connect with him, but only after a challenge had been conquered. An elaborate test evaluating who might be safe enough to gain entry into his world. He was his own gatekeeper, but the treasure at the end of his challenges was the greatest of all, entrance into the mind and heart of Stephen Sondheim. So in conclusion, the next time you watch, say, Sunday in the Park with George, and you see the character of a painter being lost in the act of creation, keep in mind its inspiration was a night Sondheim spent thinking about his friends and how he could use a game to create moments of clarity and connection. 2 things I hope I was able to channel Sondheim to bring to you today, if even just a little bit. Thank you so much. Now, if you're interested in my book, of course you can get the book, but I have all sorts of other things available as well. I have a podcast series, which is in the lower right-hand corner. We just dropped the 7th episode this week. As I mentioned, I have over 60 recorded hours of original interviews with people who knew Sondheim, played his games, developed shows with him, and many of them said I could use them in other contexts. And so I decided to make a podcast series where I bring people in who weren't appropriate for the book, but because they didn't know Sondheim, but have expertise on the content area. And together, we listen to the interviews around different topics like escape rooms or crossword puzzles, and then analyze them together and figure out what does it mean for us about Stephen Sondheim. So you can check them out anywhere you listen to podcasts. And there's a QR code for it as well. My most active place on social media is on Instagram, where I'm constantly posting all sorts of cool things I find. Even today, I found something I didn't know existed. People are constantly sending me things. So the book is done, but this project is far from done. And the more people know about it, the more things I'm going to keep learning about. So the Instagram account is the place to follow me there and keep on top of my research. And if you want to contact me and don't want to go to Instagram, you'll see the QR code on the right to my website for the book, matchingmindswithsondheim.com. And that QR code will take you to the page to send me messages. I will get those. And if you just want to hit that X on the bottom, that'll get you into my very infrequent email newsletter, where I tell people about upcoming speaking engagements like this one, cool things that might happen around the book, new podcasts, and stuff like that. So with that, I want to, again, thank you so much for spending your hour here. And we have a few minutes for some Q&A. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and post them directly into the chat. Max and I will be watching for them. Otherwise, thank you so much for being with us today. And I hope you have opportunities, as I did, to match minds with Sondheim.
Barry, this was phenomenal. Thank you so much again for joining us. And thank you everyone for playing along in these games, for participating in the chat. Please do feel free to add some questions here. Barry, I have a few for you. One's probably an easy one. So I'll actually start with my more fun one that I was thinking of as I was watching this presentation. We'll give people a few minutes to think if they have any questions. So Barry, I'm a huge murder mystery fan. And if any, I don't know if anybody else here has watched, Only Murders in the Building, or there's one, The House, that was on Netflix recently, The Murder in the White House, which was I thought was phenomenal. So that was probably the most complicated one I've ever seen. And my question stems from this. I'm embarrassed to say I'm not very good at figuring them out. And I love to sort of picture them as a game, and there's a game theory in there as well. But when you talked about this murder game, that first thing that came to mind was this. Do you think that when these are what qualifies as like a good murder mystery or a good game in that way? And like how do you go about solving it in a more strategic way? Is that ever something that crosses your mind?
So here's how I'll answer your question, Max, because that's not my wheelhouse, murder mysteries. But I will tell you what Stephen Sondheim said was required for good mystery. And that's true in The Last of Sheila as well. And he actually wrote a murder mystery that was a straight play that came out in the 1990s. He said, there's all sorts of clues that are going to be given to the audience to try and figure it out. You're watching people in the show, whether it's a movie or a play, trying to figure it out. But you and the audience get to play along as well, and have to. If you're not playing along, it's not well done. But there are certain clues that are important. Those clues must be shown twice. So again, this is part of what I think is so interesting about Sondheim's designs. I call this one mentorship, the value of mentorship. The goal is not for you to say, oh, Sondheim was so smart the way he created it. He wants you to say, I'm so smart for figuring it out. And so he's going to mentor you and have your back every step along the way to help you to get there. So the idea being that there's certain clues that are crucial, and his job is to make sure he gives them to you not once but twice so that you have a chance to get it, reflects that value. Now, in the chat, I see we have a question from David. David says, what was the name of the board game that Sondheim designed? He actually designed quite a few. In the early 50s, the first one that we know of was called Stardom, Stardom, or Camp, C-A-M-P. It's called Stardom because in it you play a starlet in Hollywood and you're trying to work your way to the top of the chain by sleeping with other Hollywood stars. And the way it's done is really campy. The things that you say, the thing in the game, the things that you do, you're putting on tiaras and sticking stars on your face and putting on jewels. And it's supposed to be men playing the game in this context, is really campy. So it's called Stardom or the Game of Camp, right? And it was based on a map he picked up at the time when he lived in Hollywood of where the stars' homes were. And he actually worked with his mom, who designed the board game for him, which is quite interesting because they had quite a challenging relationship. The next game we know that he made was called either the Game of Hal Prince or Producer. And this game creates a different system. His Stardom system is fictional in his mind. The one for Stardom is the one he lived in Broadway. it is a one in which you are playing the producer of a Broadway show over the course of an entire season. And you have to manage your actors, your directors, your backers, your critics, and you have to decide which shows you're going to invest in and how you're going to make sure they have the resources they need so you can be successful at the end. Hal Prince liked to joke that he would win, but it would take him as long to play as it would to do an entire season on Broadway, making fun of Stephen Sondheim for making such a complex game. Those are the two games he's most well known for. And then there's the third one, which is actually three. This is a trilogy of games he created. He called them a series for Leonard Bernstein in 1968. In August 1968, Leonard Bernstein turned 50, and he was also stepping down from being the conductor. I think it was the New York Philharmonic, at Lincoln Center. And so he created a trilogy of games to honor him, in which there is a narrative. And the narrative in the game is who is going to replace Leonard Bernstein. And it might be you, the player. That's what you're competing to do. And the first board game, you are going to a musical conservatory school, and you need to either get his assistance in the game to succeed or avoid him from being difficult. That game is called Diploma. The second game is called Itinerary, in which you are now running around the world, because Leonard Bernstein was running around the world and hard to get, and you have to audition for him. But you are combining assets that you're collecting that lets you build your audition, and it has to be as short as possible. Because again, Sondheim's teasing his friend, Leonard Bernstein was known to have a short attention span, so the person with the shortest audition could win. So that was Itinerary. And then the third game is called Podium. And now you're in not every Fisher Hall, but whatever the theater was called back then that Bernstein used to conduct in. Bernstein, a little tiny character of Bernstein, is at a little tiny podium, and it's kind of like a maze, and you have to get through the maze, and whoever gets to the podium first wins. But at all the intersections were people from Bernstein's life who are either going to slow you down or speed you up. So that's kind of this farcical, race game to get you to the end. And so many of those games have been lost to fires or misplaced, but I've seen the board game for Diploma. The game board for Stardom appeared, having been found in a box last year in June and shown for just a few days for the Doyle auction, which was the Sondheim auction of Belongs in His House, but was then pulled down offline. The photos I showed earlier were photos from that. And we haven't seen the board for publicly, so we don't know if it exists, for the Hal Prince game. But again, the cards for it were also found at the same time, shown momentarily online for the Doyle auction, and then also pulled down. Long answer, David, for excellent question.
Great question, David. So I think we've got probably time for maybe just one more question. So if anyone does have one, please feel to pop that in the chat. And I just, Barry, once again, want to congratulate you on the book. Want to thank you for being here. With these last couple minutes, if anyone else has one, I'll let them put it in here. But I do want to remind everybody that we're also going to be sending out the information that's on these QR codes. I will include in the post-event email. So if you're not able to access here, Barry's just going to reach out to me. We're going to have all of these in link format when you get the post-event survey and this recording. Again, a quick plug for our YouTube channel, which we just relaunched. So we're going to have all of our webinars on there, which is very exciting. So not only can you watch this immediately afterwards with the recording link, but it's actually going to be back up on our playlist, which we're very happy with. Barry, I think we're seeing a lot of thank yous in the chat. So I think this is a great time to wrap. But everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Barry, thanks for staying connected with us. Go Cats. And if anybody else is back for reunion next week, welcome back. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Max. Thanks, everybody.